Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we are on the second round of GE discount sales, so I thought I'd give my opinions on the nations which have their discounts and which picks I would go for when it comes to the game, when it comes to the ground and aviation vehicles, and anything else that is on offer. Right now, the Chinese, French, and also Swedish are actually on sale, so that is pretty cool. And when it comes to China still doesn't have a ton of premiums, and a lot of them are copy-paste ones from the tech tree, so not too interesting, but there is one I would like to point out for the ground. So when it comes to it, you have basically these two, the T-34-85 and the IS-2, which are significant ones. They're unique vehicles with the different numbers, but generally they're just copies of stuff that you find in the tech tree, and for me, I think the only real reason to pick up something like this T-34-85 is because it is at rank 4 instead of rank 3 compared to the standard T-34-85s, therefore it's able to research rank 5 and below efficiently. I don't think this is enough to pick it up. You know, this BR for the Chinese 5.7 is already very strong with the T-34s, the M18 and also the M36 plus the IS-2. It doesn't need premium backing to be able to get through it, so I don't think it's required. Same with the IS-2, long reload, no gun depression, and also the armor itself isn't exactly the best. So for me, it's a no on both of these, but a consideration should be put forward for the T-34 just because of the rank 4 nature. The one that I do want to focus on is the T-62. Now, even though the T-62 doesn't really have a lineup around it at 8.3, it does have the CM25, but that's unfortunately about it. You can run it with two very stellar 8.0s, the Type 69 and the Type 59. These are pretty much stabilized T-54s with access to a really nice heat FS shell, which pens anything that you face. They also get some really nice APC-BC on top of that, and even the wonderful Type 69 gets access to an APDS-FS, which is probably the worst of its type in the game, which is why the Heat FS is the upgrade to it. But if you run these two mediums plus the T-62, you have a pretty good lineup, and you can slot in other stuff like the WZ-305 if you have it with the proximity shells, or you can up tier it to 8.7, which is another really nice lineup for China with the ZTZ-59D1 and the M60A3 TTS. I think it works best at its BR though. The T-62 is one of my favorite mediums in the game. The main reason for this is because it has a really good stabilized gun, it has really nice ammunition in the form of the APFS-DS with the 3BM4 and also the 3BM3. Basically, the 3BM4 has better angled penetration than the 3BM3. That is why you should take it over it, because the angled penetration is the one that matters the most when you're facing the majority of the targets at this BR. When it pens, which is the majority of the time, it does a ton of damage and goes straight through. It gets access to artillery, which is really nice. It's a pretty mobile vehicle and also has a low silhouette compared to a lot of other medium tanks that you see. 3-man crew in the turret and one in the drivers right here. Because of how the turret is spaced, it is quite hard to one-shot this vehicle unless you have the driver, because then you could just shoot straight through the driver, hit the gunner and the commander. But if it's just the turret exposed, it's very hard to kill in one shot. So with the good gun, the good penning round, you do suffer a little bit. The reload rate is quite high, but it has quite decent reverse and also good maneuverability to be able to peek, shoot, and then go back and just do that over and over and over again. It has good gun depression for a Chinese vehicle. One of the problems with a lot of the Chinese vehicles, especially of Soviet descent, is their gun depression is absolutely terrible. So -6 really helps you out, and it has a ridiculously high reward for research, 706%, but understand I do have a 30% booster running right now, so it's going to be a little bit lower than that in the 600s and 80%, but that is still incredibly high for a vehicle like this, which is really good. Overall, one of my favorite mediums to play in the game. Very versatile, works incredibly well. Much better in the Soviet tech tree with that A3 lineup, but still works very well in the Chinese one with the backup that it has. It also is a rank 6 pick, so it's useful for researching the whole of the Chinese tech tree, which is very important. When it comes to the aviation side of China, I think there is 2 picks for the GE stuff. Obviously, the A6M2 is quite nice, but, you know, it's something you can find in other trees. The first pick is the H81A2. The reason for this is it's very similar to the P40s that you see around the place, but does have some unique stuff to it. Has access to the 212.7s and 2.762s. Also has really nice research and also really nice SL rewards, and does get access to the 500-pound bomb, so it's useful in ground forces as well. It is also a 2.3, which is lower than a lot of the other P40s, just because it has it's one of the earlier models. You know, it's more similar to the P40C than the P40E that you see in the tech tree, and also has this really cool camo on it, which is just awesome. So overall, this is a really nice vehicle to be able to get through to rank 3. If you're not interested in a lot of the copy and paste that the Chinese vehicles have on offer, then this is the thing to get you through it, with its really good rewards. A lot of China bottom tier and even high tier is copy and paste, so it does put people off a lot, and by purchasing something like the H81, you can get through it pretty quickly. The Key 45 is also a decent pick, but I would still say no. It's definitely not worth going for. This is the Key 45 high tie, and it actually has access to all the bells and whistles of pretty much all the other Key 45s. So it has access to the Shrug music, has access to the 20s and the 37, but I still don't think it's good enough to be able to pick it over something like the H81. I would much prefer have this over this, even though the SL reward on this thing is insane at 810%, meaning that you'll never lose SL flying this thing. But at the same time, it's going to be a slightly worse experience than flying the H81. If I have a vehicle which has slightly lower rewards, but I feel like I can do better in, I'm always going to pick that over the one with the higher rewards. The second vehicle that is my pick for the Chinese aviation is the Ki 84 Ko Hayate. And the reason for this is because the Ki 84 in the Japanese tree is one of my favorite vehicles in the tech tree. It was one of my favorites to spade. I've played it way after spading as well. I've even played it as recently as this year, even though I spaded it maybe 5 years ago at this point. And the Ki 84 Ko is just a really nice, well-balanced vehicle. Has access to 220mm with a lot of ammunition. It also has two 12.7s to back up those 20mm, and it's just a really good air superiority fighter. Has great rate of climb for 5.3, has good energy retention, and also after a dive it gets 2 or 3 really good turns off, and I mean insanely good, to stay on target, and then it has to reset. This thing does kind of rely on its speed, so if you're caught at low speed you will die. There are a lot of vehicles that were added to the game over the years which will be which will be a lot better in the acceleration department compared to the Ki 84 Ko. A lot of the super props which you find around 5.7 to 6.3. But it's still a very positive plane. It plays a lot around 4.7, which is a very strong BR for it, and even 5.0. Even if it gets into 5.7 games, it can easily deal with the enemies that are around it. It's a fantastic plane once you master it. It's good at high altitude, mid altitude, and low altitude. It all depends on the playstyle that you pick for it, instead of having to worry about the weaknesses of the vehicle itself. It also gets access to 250s, so you can use this in ground if you feel like, as a ground support vehicle, and then an air superiority vehicle. I would say it's much more tailored to air realistic though, just because of the fact that this thing is much more an air superiority fighter, and also not a direct turn fighter, so isn't going to do well in the cramped spaces of something like ground realistic. It's just a really fun plane, and if you're looking for something to get you through the Chinese tech tree, I mean, it will get you all the way up to, you know, rank 5 with very nice RP and SL rewards on it. It's a really nice aircraft and really cheap as well. It's just a great pick in my opinion. When it comes to French aviation, I think there are a few picks that definitely should be considered. But one thing as well, remember, we already know with the upcoming Battle Pass, the Season 3 of it, that we are getting a P39 premium for the French, I believe, at rank 3. So that should be something that you take into account when it comes to your purchases now, because very soon, when it comes to the Battle Pass, you may already get a vehicle that fills a different role. So the two vehicles I would have a look at is the P40F5 Lafayette. The Lafayette is just a standard P40F with a really nice camouflage on it. It also gets access to the Cricket camouflage, which you can buy for 200 GE, which is pretty cool. Just basically adds Cricket here. You know, doesn't do really anything else. And obviously the Mad Cot as well. I believe it does change the number as well at the back. So depending on what you want to run, it's kind of nice. Does it actually change this? Yeah, it changes the insignias as well. So overall, quite a nice little camo. The P40F is a very strong P40. You know, it's one of those which I take out every so often just to kind of relax in. You can see I'm 17-2 in it after 6 battles, and the 50 cals are very strong. They do a ton of damage. You get a lot of ammunition with it as well. The only issue you have with this thing is you have to make sure not to wet too much because the engine will overheat and die. Everything else about the vehicle works incredibly well, and one of the biggest bonuses to this vehicle, if you're used to flying P40s, is obviously the medium to low altitude performance, and also a little bit of the higher altitude performance with the F, is the fact that the majority of the French lower tech tree is absolute trash. So rank 1, the only saving factor out of this whole area is the H75s. They're pretty fun, the rest of it is really not good. The rank 2 is really rough as well, with the only redeeming factor being the VG33C. So getting the Lafayette and being able to research all through this without having to play it is a godsend. It really is. France, for its rank 1 and 2, definitely has one of the roughest research paths for aircraft, and getting this just means that you can get to the nice American vehicles and play them once again if you've already played them in the American tree, and make it a little bit more fun. And also the MB157 and the VBs are pretty fun, but that's obviously a different story. The Lafayette means you can just bypass a lot of the rubbish in the French tree. I don't know how else to put it. Even as somebody who, you know, I like spading vehicles, like that's kind of what I do. There are even some French vehicles I haven't spaded yet, such as these ones, just because they were so bad. So yeah, that is that should be a damning fate for it. The other vehicle to look at is the P47D22RE. This is one of the Razorback P47s that were added. Now, the reason why a P47 is always a good premium pickup is because it's a good multi-role vehicle. In Air Realistic, it can play as a really good boom and zoom aircraft with really nice high altitude performance and insane amounts of ammunition, meaning that its longevity in the game, the amount of time it can stay up in the air is incredibly long compared to many other aircraft, so you can just outlive and out-survive a lot of stuff that you face. At the same time, in Ground Realistic, you have two 1000s and one 500-pound bomb that you can land on enemies in two different bombing runs. The 1000s drop together, so you basically get a 2000-pound bomb drop and then a 500-pound bomb drop, and this is really useful for a plane just to do a ton of damage. The 50 cals are also great for either doing the air superiority role in Ground Realistic, or even just going after light ground targets with the ground belts. They generally have decent penetration, so you can even pen stuff like Panzer IVs from the top. The 4.3 lineup as well for the French is not really there when it comes to ground. The main lineup that you're going to run this with is the 5.3 or if you have the Lorraine 155, and even at 5.3 it works really well with the P47. It also has really good rewards on it, especially the SL reward is very nice and incredibly cheap to run, especially with the 33 repairs. Don't be fooled by the 15,000 SL repair costs. You know, I know a lot of people are going to look at that and be like, oh, it's crazy expensive. Well, yeah, but if you play with the high altitude idea and with outliving your opponents and diving on them when you need to instead of, when you're forced to, you're not going to die a lot in this thing. You're going to have a really good time. So yeah, it's a very fun machine. I'd stay away from the F-84F and the Naval. Both of them are very substandard machines, and the rest of them, they're okay, but I prefer these two. When it comes to France Ground, I think there are 3 picks for me. The first one, I believe, is a GE Premium. I apologize if it isn't. I couldn't find anything about if it is or not, but I'm pretty sure it is, and that's the B1 Ter. The B1 Ter is a heavy tank for France. It is at rank 2, has not great rewards on it, but it is really survivable, and the only issue it really has is against Swedish APDS. It's also part of a really good French ground lineup, the Crusader Mark II, the M3A3 Stuart, and the B1 Bis. Basically what the B1 Ter is a B1 Bis, which actually has a little bit of extra armor on the front of it, and also an extra crew member, giving it even more survivability when it comes to the vehicle. It has a ton of side armor, a ton of back armor, and the turret is the same all the way around, so it technically doesn't really have a weak spot on it, apart from the top area, which doesn't matter because it's nowhere near the actual stuff that matters on the vehicle itself. It is just one of those bruisers that runs around at this tier and is incredibly strong if you face it. There's a lot of vehicles that can't deal with it, especially in not spaded forms, and it just does really, really well. I use this thing alongside the 2 light tanks, the Crusader Mark II and the M3A3, when the French decals ask for first places. This is the lineup I go to because it's the strongest in the French tree, in my opinion. The next one is a bit of a curveball, and it's the AMX-13 M24. This one is 3.3 and part of, once again, a pretty strong lineup. The M4A1 and the AMX-13 FL11 make a really nice 3-stack lineup with this thing, and you can even up tier it to 3.7 if you want with the M4A4 and the ARL44 ACL1 because of the fact that it's a light tank and has additional stuff on top of the fact that it has, the gun. So the AMX-13 M24 is an AMX-13 chassis with a Chaffee turret. It has access to a 50 cal on the top. One of the only issues with this thing is the gun itself is not like a lot of the other American 75s that you've seen, mainly because it doesn't have a stabilizer. So this thing, when you're on the move, doesn't get the stability buff. Instead, you're going to have to come to a halt to make it, stable to fire. You can still fire it on the move and everything can still be fine with it, but, it's a little bit of an issue while moving around in the vehicle, which is why I use this more as a very aggressive scout compared to anything else. It does get access to the M61 shot, which penetrates anything at this BR as long as you aim correctly, gets access to smoke grenades too, gets access to 14 of them, and it's kind of like in the fashion of the Crusader, so it fires one out of the top, and it just means that you can just keep popping them as you go along. It means that maneuvering around is a lot easier to do, and also gets access to some really nice rewards. I really enjoy this vehicle. It's a lot of fun. I like the MX-13 chassis a lot in the game. I think all the vehicles are pretty good apart from the MX-13 Hot, and with the 75mm, it just feels really nice to use. The next one is the AMX-30. So the AMX-30 sits itself at 7.7 at rank 5. This means that it can research the whole of the tech tree efficiently apart from these three vehicles here. And the AMX-30 goes alongside the AMX-30 1972, which is technically a better version than the premium. Then you have the Surbasse, which recently got lowered to 7.7 as well. You also have the AMX-50 and the Lorraine 40T that you can run alongside these things. And even if you want light tank support, you have the MX-1390 and the AML-90, or if you want to go for a curveball, you got the Foch as well, if you want to bring this in. 7.7 is an incredibly strong BR for ground France, and the premium AMX-30 just adds a little bit of easier research and also reward to it. So even though the standard tech tree AMX-30 is better because it has the coaxial 20mm, the AMX-30 premium doesn't get it, but still gets access to the nice 105mm with, of course, the heat shell, which is very powerful, does a ton of damage, and can kill anything it faces. The MX-30 platform is very fast, it has some dodgy armor, and also has this fuel tank which sometimes will just eat shells, meaning that you can get away from the battlefield pretty efficiently. It does have this first stage ammo stowage in it though, so if you pen the turret it generally does go pop, so you do always want to get the first shot off in this thing. But as an addition to an already strong 7.7 lineup, it just gives you that little bit of a boost that you may need to be able to get to those higher echelons and get through some of these lineups. It's also a nice lineup to fall back on, mainly because of the fact a lot of the higher tier French lineups, 9.3, 9.7, are really bad to play. They're not very fun. You know, somebody who spaded the MX-32 had a very rough time with it because it just doesn't have a lot of backup. The MX-30B2 and the MX-30B2 Brennus, they generally have a bad record. You know, not a lot of people like them, but I actually think they're really fun vehicles because they get access to APF SDS, they get access to laser rangefinders, and they also get access to thermals at much lower BRs than most medium tanks do. So they work pretty well, but the rest of it is just really rough in rank 6. So being able to fall back on this rank 5 lineup just makes it a lot nicer to play. When it comes to Sweden, there's actually not a ton of picks, mainly because there ain't a ton of premium vehicles, and a lot of them are pack vehicles. But when it comes to the ground one, there is definitely one that shines out, and that is the STRV-81 RB52. This is a Centurion Mark III, which has access to SS-11 missiles. It was in the British tree for the longest time, and now in the Swedish tree, it also has a really nice lineup around it, just like the British one does. So you have the SDRV-81, the Cent Mark III in the Swedish tree, then you can run the IKV-91 with it if you feel like as a light tank option, or an USH, which is also going to be a light tank very soon that you can bring along with it, or you can even up tier it with the SDRV-101 and also the UDES-33-277. The RB-52 is a nice vehicle to have just because the Centurion Mark III platform is very nice in the game. Access to the stabilizer and also the 84mm means that you can do a ton of damage with the APDS that exists. It also has, you know, good survivability with the smoke grenades. The only thing that lets down the Centurions in game is that they're not exactly fast vehicles, but overall I still think they're a lot more mobile than other machines that Britain has, so I think it's completely fine. They also have a little bit of a weird armor structure, but because of the fact that you get the stabilizer with the 84mm, it just means that you should always get the first shot off in any engagement. So shooting for key areas such as gunner, ammo, or driver will always do you well. And then just while you're reloading, you can give it a go with the missile and see if you can land one of them as well. I think overall this thing is a very good vehicle, great research on it, and also pretty good decent SL. And if you're looking to try and get to the higher echelons of the Swedish tech tree, like I know a lot of people are since it's very strong, it's definitely one to go for. And staying away from the STRV-103 since it's still very dodgy to use, I also believe it's a pack vehicle. The 81 is a great secondary to that idea. Sweden is very similar to Italy when we talked about it yesterday, in the way that I don't really think you need too many premiums to actually get through the tech tree. The standard tech tree vehicles are so good, especially in aerialistic, you don't really need that initial boost or extra boost to get through stuff. So the picks that I would actually have are very limited in this regard. I would actually just recommend playing a lot of the tech tree. You know, play the J22s, they're incredibly fun. Same with the B18s, the J21s are insanely fun as well, including the A21s. The J26 is just a Mustang. And then the J29s are not very good, so that's a little bit of an issue. But the J28, the Vampire, and the SK60 are amazingly fun machines. Incredibly good in the game itself. So when it comes to premiums, there are kind of two options to at least consider. You got the Morco Maran, and the Morco Maran is okay. It's not the best thing in the world, but it does have access to some pretty nice weaponry and an engine that really likes to overheat, so you've got to watch out for that. The main reason to get this thing is because after playing through stuff such as the French with the MS-405 series and the 410 series, it's really nice to actually have one of those aircraft which was built from that design, which actually is not too bad and works pretty well. And the Morco Maran is one of those vehicles. If you want to get past the, rank 1s and 2s pretty quickly, it's not a bad little pickup, and it's also incredibly cheap, so that definitely should be one to look for. The other one is the Saab 105OE, and the reason for this is because this is a pay-to-win vehicle. And what do I mean by this? Well, for me, a pay-to-win vehicle is a vehicle that you can pay for, which is better than its standard tech tree version, or better than anything that is in the tech tree at this BR. So when we have a look at the 105OE, what makes it better than the 105G, you may ask? Well, the 105OE can actually carry guns, so the 30mm Akans, and also air-to-air missiles in the form of RB-24s, which are similar to the AIM-9Bs. It can also carry the AGMs alongside the air-to-airs as well. If we have a look at the standard Tech Tree 1, it can't do that. It doesn't even get access to the AGMs, and also can't carry its guns alongside the RB-24s, or the similar named AIM-9Bs. So if you're looking for a direct advantage in the game and a pay-to-win vehicle, look no further than the Saab 105OE. It also has a lower repair cost. Oh no, it has a higher repair cost, not really a surprise, but it has way higher rewards on it as well. And if you're looking for a vehicle to be able to research into the higher echelons and want to basically dodge the J29s because they're not too good, it's a pretty nice little pick. It also gets an air spawn along with its missiles and 30mm, and because of the access to the AGMs and the 30mm, it also is pretty good in ground realistic as well. So yeah, pretty much as simple as that. Anyway, this has been having a look at the second stage of 30% discounts when it comes to the game. When the third set of 30% discounts come, I'll make sure to cover them too. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd like to thank BRFC, Swollen Ostrich, Teddy, John Ryman, Universe, Conte Baraka, Eugens Terry, Ambrosius McClellan, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Lafouche, Barine, and Samuel Schlick for supporting the channel.